Hey everybody. Hey. Good evening, y'all. It's good to see everybody. Welcome to the live stream. Everyone can hear me? Yeah. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. All right. So we will go for a while tonight. I don't know. We'll see how long. Maybe 45 minutes. Maybe an hour. We'll see how long it takes to get through the material that you guys want to get through. I'm exhausted. I don't know about you guys. I'm exhausted. So just to review what we're going to do about the test, as I mentioned, we're gonna we're not going to do any. There's no reading ahead of time. It's just going to be short answer questions. A couple of the questions are going to be excerpts from sources, probably from the at least one of them is going to be from the Treaty of Versailles documents. I am tired. That you had. And when I give you the source, I'll give you the title of the source. So that I'm not going to ask you to guess the source, but to analyze the source and to interpret the source. And then I'm going to give you other short answer questions, which really are going to focus on the stuff that you read about World War One, the stuff that you read about World War Two, connecting the 19th century to the 20th century, your particular element that you studied, and then talking about the interwar period and talking about the consequence of World War One. It's not going to be a super long test, and it's not going to be super difficult. You'll probably have 2 or 3 sources that excerpts from sources on the test. And that's it. Okay. So let's start with the questions that we have. Again, I'll go as long as we get questions tonight. Okay. Let's see. What is the July crisis? Very simply put, the July crisis is the events of the summer of July 1914, following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. You read the sources from the documents that were sent by Serbia, by the Austro-Hungarian Empire to Serbia, and from Serbia to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, regarding demands that the Austro-Hungarian Empire put on Serbia. That may be on the test also, by the way, those primary sources. The demands and requirements of the Austro-Hungarians to the Serbians, and the Serbian response. And then once the Austro-Hungarians declare war on Serbia, the consequence of that, which ultimately leads to the breakout of the war itself. Sorry, guys. I have tea in here, not coffee. I should have coffee here. But yeah, so that's the July crisis. Okay. What do we need to know about World War One? You need to know what we talked about in class. You need to know what you read about in terms of the material from the AP textbook, which has to do with the methods of fighting, the involvement in the United States when Russia left the war. That's basically it, and obviously the Treaty of Versailles. And understanding the Treaty of Versailles is important, and that's a big part of the war. Okay. Does socialism relates to the start of World War One? That's an interesting question. I guess yes and no. To socialism, it's a tough. On the face of it, no, because the various factors leading to the First World War don't really have to do with socialist countries. Socialism is not really in vogue as a political or economic model, really in any country except in Russia. And in Russia, you have socialist elements. Bolsheviks are beginning to play a role in the politics of Russia in the beginning of the 20th century, and they're exerting pressure onto the Tsar and onto the government. Now, does that have an effect on Russia entering World War One? No, not really, because Russia entered World War One as a result of their treaty obligations. Russia is a protectorate of Serbia. It's part of Russia's policy of pan-Serbianism in general. Russia's very pro creating countries in the Baltic region, the Balkan, excuse me, and so that really is the cause of Russia's entrance into the First World War. But there were major pressures in Russia that were taking place from socialist elements, and ultimately that will lead to Russia's withdrawal from the war because of the intense pressure that the Tsar was facing. Yeah. Okay. I think that's the best answer. Because and again, socialism as a political model, and as an economic model, doesn't really become entrenched until after the First World War. And it's after the First World War where you see countries such as Britain adopt more socialist models. You can call them more socialist models in terms of in terms of how they approach governments. Okay. How detailed do we have to know the wars, specific battles? Whatever's in the textbook. Yeah. So the textbook. Just looking at the textbook concerning the Second World War that you have. You should know some of the key terms here. Be able to sort of compare what happens in the First World War to the Second World War, and you should be able to identify all of these key elements that you had in the textbook reading. I think it was pages 925 to 930. Those were that's what you had in the textbook. Okay. That's it. 4 questions. That's all we have so far. We're 8 minutes in, and we've had 4 questions. So that's it. Are we done? We can be done. Any other questions? Tea. Okay. My favorite mug, by the way. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams, live the life you've imagined. Henry David Thoreau. Cheers. What is the comparison between World War I and World War II? That's not. I'm not gonna. That's gonna be. That will be a question on the test. But it may be a question on the test. I'm not gonna answer that question. John, what's the format? You're gonna have short answer questions. I don't know how many you'll have. It's not gonna be that many. 5, 6, maybe 7 at the most. You're not gonna have that many. Yeah, you're not gonna have trouble finishing it. Again, I'm much more interested to see what you guys have. I mean, what you guys have done so far is really good. And then, I think I said this at the beginning of the semester. What we're doing now is really in part to set up what we're going to do for the rest of the year, which a large part is the Holocaust and the State of Israel. And we have 2 really good assignments, big assignments, long-term assignments with both of those for the Holocaust. You would be exploring the Holocaust as it manifests in different countries and regions around Europe, and sort of the consequences of what happens to Jews living in different areas of Europe, to understand the diversity of the Holocaust itself, and that there was no unified or uniform. There was a uniformity when it came to the Holocaust and then the history of the State of Israel. I think we're gonna You're gonna have a project revolving around something to do with peace plans that have been historically they have been offered and have been suggested to create a lasting peace between Israel and the Palestinians. It's something that we may be working on during the second half of during the Israel curriculum piece. Okay. Did Germany switch from the failed Schleifen plan in World War One to Blitzkrieg in World War Two? Yes, they did. Though to be sure, I think textbook, the AP textbook, in the first reading article points this out. The Schleifen plan, while it was a good plan, was also fatally flawed for a couple of reasons. The Germans, in crafting the Schleifen plan, part of what they had to do was take huge numbers of troops on huge numbers of trains through Belgium into France. It required huge numbers of, it required like 200 trains, I think, and 50 cars at each train. Just a huge number of trains to get that done and to take all of the guns and the various things that they needed for war, and then it necessitated bringing them back to the Eastern Front to fight against Russia. And so that was one thing. Yes, and they used Blitzkrieg in World War II. In part, that comes as a result of the fact that Germany, in the 1930s, they are able to manufacture weapons at a prodigious rate. They remilitarize, even though the Treaty of Versailles necessitates, requires that Germany basically demilitarize. Germany in the 1930s, after the rise of the Nazi Party in 1933, and the model lesson tomorrow will be on that topic. The Germans begin to remilitarize, and they created a military which was unparalleled at that point, really creating a machinery of war that no other country had, including Britain, including France, including the United States, while the UK was demilitarizing during the course of the 1930s. Germany was remilitarizing, and so Germany had an immense advantage when it came to machines of war, and they used that to their advantage. They used it in the invasion of Poland, conquering Poland in 3 weeks, basically, in September of 1939, conquering the rest of Western Europe, basically, Belgium, the Netherlands, and most of France in the spring of 1939. Excuse me, in the spring of 1940, and then using the air power that they had to pound Britain during the summer into the fall of 1940 in the Battle of Britain. So they were able to use their advantage of manufacturing, their advantage of remilitarization, to basically just wipe out the armies in Poland, in Belgium, and France, and pound Britain during the course of the summer and fall of 1940. What pages are the readings? I think the textbook reading is 925 to 930. I think. Okay. Let's see. Any questions by emails? Oh, just close the email. Nothing. Let's see. Abby, are the Schleifen plan and Blitzkrieg similar? I don't know. You tell me. Maybe that will be asked on the examination tomorrow. Find similarities and differences. You don't know? Right. I know. That's what I want you to think about. Yes. Are they similar? Are they different? That's what you should be thinking about. Yes. Very tough stuff. More questions. No, fewer questions. It gives me more time to make the test tonight. It's great. More questions. Yes, the interwar period, you only have to know your topic. That is correct. That is correct. Yes. How about you guys? I'm exhausted. It's Monday only, and I'm exhausted. Yeah. Do we need to know all the weapons used in World War One? We didn't talk about that many. We talked about gas. We talked about tanks, guns, airplanes. There aren't that many. So yes, you should. You should. Mm. Um, okay, from Abby, was the us, I assume you mean the US, ultimately involved in the Treaty of Versailles? Versailles. Yeah, they were. They were part of the negotiations, absolutely. Um, Woodrow Wilson was in Europe for, I think, 6 or 7 months negotiating the Treaty of Versailles while he was president. Think about that now, that would be unprecedented for her, president of the United States, to leave the country for longer than a week, albeit like 5, 6, 7 months. I'm pretty sure Woodrow Wilson did when he was negotiating the Treaty of Versailles. But yes, they were involved in negotiating the Treaty of Versailles, even though Wilson's 14 points were not really welcomed by Britain or France. They absolutely negotiated. Now we know as part of, sorry guys, the primary source documents on the Treaty of Versailles. There was a document written by a British observer about the negotiations, and uh, he talked about how no one was on the same page. That the American president and the British premier, they had contentions and contradictions. They could not um, get on the same page. Clemenceau and Wilson were fighting with each other. There was no actual consensus, and so they couldn't find a way to come together. So yes, they were involved in the Treaty of Versailles, but then they rejected the Treaty of Versailles again from Senator Harry Cabot Lodge, Henry Cabot Lodge, who says that um, who says that the okay, who basically rejected the president's and the negotiated peace. Just my wife making noise. The negotiated peace. So ultimately, the Senate rejects it, um, and yeah, but they were absolutely were involved. Just looking at the speech by Henry Cabot Lodge, and let's see. Yeah, he's talking about how the United States should be independent, and they cannot get themselves involved in other conflicts in other countries. Um, yeah, so that's what he has to say. All right. Questions? More questions. More questions. Which primary sources do we have to know for the test? This is from, yeah, you have to know um, the Treaty of Versailles documents. You have to know the documents that we looked at, the Austro-Hungarian demands on Belgium, on Serbia, and Serbia's responses. Those are the primary sources that you need to know, and any primary source that you dealt with for your particular topics. Okay. Oh, God. I'm tired. What caused World War II? That's an excellent question, Abby, and a question that will absolutely be on the examination tomorrow. Based on what we learned, based on what we know, that question will absolutely be on the examination tomorrow. Okay. Yes, it's a great thought question that I would like for you to answer. Was France only liberated by the end of World War II by de Gaulle? De Gaulle was becomes the leader of France in exile, but he doesn't actually liberate France. France is liberated by the Allied armies, mostly the United States. And, yeah. All right, guys. Any additional questions? Sorry? Jessica says you're going to do great.
Anyone have any questions about that? They don't like.
Maybe. That's not for now.
Those are the only things I know.
You know history.
Those who don't remember or destined to
repeat it. There you go. Okay.
Opposites attract.
Thank you. Abby, let's go over all the information. Thank you, but no, we're not going to go through all of the information. It's a really interesting idea, but no, that's not the purpose of this review. Maybe other teachers will do that, but not the purpose of this review. Okay. What were the alliances of World War I? So there were a number of alliances in world that leads to World War I. First, you have the dual pact of Germany and Austria, creating the dual alliance, and Italy then entering that in 1882. You then have you have the various ententes, the triple entente between Britain and France, and then Britain and Russia, and so that is those are the main allies leading up to the First World War. The Ottomans come out on the side of the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians. And you want to be in the shot, Jesse? Like I'm going to put you on the screen. You want to say hi? Here. Say hi. Honestly, Jessica is just sitting there taking notes on all of this. That's what she's really there doing. Your head is still. Sorry. Yes, I agree. And Italy was basically coaxed to side with England and France and Russia through promises made by them that following the end of the war, they would be getting land from Germany, from that was part of Germany. Ultimately, as the part of the Big Four who negotiated the Treaty of Versailles, Vittorio Orlando was part of that negotiating team. Ultimately, Italy never got substantial land following the First World War. And after that, there was a sort of malaise that hit the general populace in Italy. As it was, the Italian government, the Italian legislature didn't have very much power, very much control. The king had more control than the legislative body. And because of this general malaise and a lack of trust in government by the people of Italy, because the governments had promised real outcomes following the Treaty of Versailles, or as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, they never got it. People in Italy didn't trust government. That allowed for the rise of the fascist party and Mussolini specifically. And Mussolini had a fairly quick rise in the early 1920s. The Black March that he goes on, where he basically takes over government and is given the ability to rule and govern for a year with no real consequence or oversight, and is able to then take over government through elections, and is able to take over government. That leads to the rise of fascism and the rise of Mussolini in Italy. So Italy again begins on the side of the Central Powers, but then is put to the side of the Allies and the Entente. Okay. You're getting everything down there?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry?
Yep.
Okay.
You're all getting
Jessica says you're all getting 100s.
That's fine.
We will see about that. Okay. Jessica wants to know if you guys are nervous. No, of course not. This is easy. Right. This is easy. You okay?
It's time to game.
Jessica's kind of tired. Okay. So more questions. Let's see. What was the point of targeting the Mediterranean in World War II? So a couple things. Mussolini saw that as his responsibility because the British had control of large segments of North Africa. Mussolini, beginning of the Second World War, did not actually come out on the side of the Germans. They initially remained neutral at the beginning of the Second World War, but once Mussolini saw that Hitler and the Germans were basically on the move, he had no choice. He invaded France, and in part, he also then invaded North Africa, pushed Italian soldiers into Egypt in order to maintain his treaty obligations with the Germans and to challenge the British, because that's where the British were located. Now there were also economic consequences. If the Suez Canal had been conquered, it would have helped in terms of reaching the oil fields of the Middle East. The British want to maintain that open line, the Suez Canal, and their ability to access the oil in the Middle East. And when the British struck back, the Italians were basically routed, but Hitler sent forces to assist the Italians. General Rommel and the Africa troops pushed into Africa in early 1942, in late 1941. And by June 1942, though, the British had turned the tide and had been able to push back against the Germans. Okay. Good. Any more questions? Does you have any questions?
Yeah, I think that.
The Crusades.
How many were there?
No. This is World War I and World War II. What? World War I, World War II?
By
Yeah, I do. What was your big mistake, Jessica? you guys want to hear what Jessica's big mistake was when she was learning about World War I and World War II? We have to wait a couple minutes for them to respond. It's not instantaneous. These are all good students.
I know.
All 5 of them that are watching right now.
I will come inside.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No.
How many?
22.
Nice job showing your dedication.
There you go. Any other questions, guys, before we call this a night? Because, yeah, I can use the time to actually make your test. Yay. Any other questions? האם יש לכם עוד שאלות? עוד שאלות. יכול לשאול את שאלות בעברית, אם אתם רוצים. Since we're watching, can we all get 100s? You get 100s for trying. Yay.
I think you should have 5 questions about your task so we can get them all right.
It's not a test.
Some more fun stuff.
That's true. Any other questions? Seriously. Going once, going twice. If there are no more questions, we will end this. And you guys can spend the night studying or not. You guys could spend the rest of the night doing whatever or not. Any other questions? I'll give it 30 more seconds and then I will wrap it up for the evening. So, any more questions for you, Jessica, about World War I, World War II, the Endor period?
Right?
What?
Build a one for advantage.
What? Yeah. Franz Ferdinand. Yes. Exactly. Okay. I don't see any more questions, so we will call it a night after 32 minutes or so. It's fine with me, guys. Good luck studying. Remember, tomorrow, be on time to class. We have a model lesson tomorrow. Be on time. Make sure you're there. There are going to be a lot of people there too, that are going to be watching. Rabbi Sina, Mr. Miller, Mrs. Herzog, myself, Mr. Kastner. So make sure you're there. Make sure we behave. Okay, guys? Thank you. All right. Have a great night, everyone. I will see you tomorrow. Get some sleep tonight. And thanks very much.